Christian and I met in South Korea in 20 something. I don't know, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was telling me about his mom's factory in South Africa, and that they're a ballet factory, and that it was always kind of her dream to make footwear alongside the ballet shoes, the dance shoes. But obviously a lot for her to manage, because she had dancewear stores in the country on top of running the production here, which is crazy. Then I came here and I got involved, like this after we fell in love and all the things, and came to South Africa, and I got involved with the digital side because my background was digital marketing. So that's kind of like the first part, and then worked here for 2 years just on the dance side and learning about the factory. And I loved it because, like, in the States, when would I ever get to do anything like this or like be involved in manufacturing? And his mom gave me a lot of free reign. So this is her factory, and she gave me a lot of free reign to make with her. We're both creative people, so
it was very fun, but it made it quite tricky for production side. But I think that was so fun that I think they just went kind of wild, But it was all kind of a massive learning curve for us too, because we had some of the background there, but we were totally going from dance, which is like a performance shoot, to like fashion, and so
it's like a completely different shoe.
Yeah.
And what we were trying to achieve too, but like, okay, so then I left the company because it was family business, and I didn't want to see the family as colleagues, and I didn't want to be wrapped up in that personally. And I love, like, obviously, like a brilliant relationship. I just decided, like, we need to divide the lines. Then I worked for another company. I had the cliche story of a bad boss, not a great leader, and he just really inspired me to go try and like stick it to the man and create a business that I believed in, that was sustainable, diverse, had fair wages, treated everybody equally, those sorts of things that I just wasn't seeing happening there, not very siloed. And and so that's how it actually started. And Matsidiso's Sutu. So the intention was to always create a brand based on South Africa that wasn't about me, wasn't about necessarily like our background, but was about the beauty and the culture here and the African continent. Like there's a lot of tribes and just these incredible derivatives and people who respect the earth. And so that was kind of like what the range was inspired by. And you'll see like Sutu, Okosa, or Zulu, like kind of very modern takes, but there's like the tribal aspect where we have animal print. Then we have locally hand-printed fabrics as well that are more bright and colorful to kind of showcase this country and the beauty of it. And Matsidiso actually is his mom's name. She's actually Antoinette, she's Afrikaans, but she grew up in the Free State during apartheid, and her experience, obviously still a segregated time, but her experience was she grew up learning Sutu, she hung out with Sutu children, had Sutu friends, and her dad's farm was one of the very first to actually build housing on it for Sutu families. And so she didn't have the same kind of perspective about that segregation from what I understand, and I loved that. And then her mom's caretaker was Sutu, one of the family friends was Sutu, and Antoinette was born, she was the child born after a miscarriage, so she was her mom's second child, and they named her Matsidiso, which is comfort after difficulty, and that is the actual name. So it like gives me chills to this day, and we've had so many weird instances with this name, but so that's the point, and the point is, as a factory, we're working on overcoming. We came from a very bootstrapped, difficult, in fact, negative cash flow situation. We were trying to get this factory back on its feet and, build a team that's cross-trained and upskilled. And Matsidiso means to me like overcoming and finding hope around every corner. And so that's kind of like the intention, and the meaning is kind of threefold.
When I tell the story, I guess also meeting Janae initially, she was very interested in fashion. In Korea, like she was like, and I mean, like she's always way better dressed than I am,
No.
always dressing me up and stuff, So then, but back then I was like, just listening to it and going, we've got this factory that's not really running at full capacity, and kind of was like, well, let's go make shoes. It was actually almost like a bit of a, I won't say a joke, but just like a comment, let's go do it, and then I think that kind of did plant it, and then it did take quite a while longer to get to even starting it, because there's so much going on. I think especially if you don't come from a sort of that background, that you're even learning about the whole, like every day you're learning, and I think even maybe for Janae to be involved initially and then leaving and coming back was almost also a good thing, because it also kind of gave her at least that time to really go and hone in on what she thinks it must, because initially when we were going to sort of launch it, it was quite a different vision and stuff, and so I think it kind of takes quite a while to sort really kind of think what to sort of have happen what you envision, and I think that it's quite a long step process, but also you can't not start because you don't think you're ready, otherwise you just kind of kick the can on the road the whole time, so you're kind of evolving with it as you go, and you say, well, maybe this isn't exact, like, maybe the team can't do this yet, let's try and develop that, but let's also start, because I think, our first pairs to where we are now, it's night and day, but we also actually were well received even way in the beginning,
With lots of learning curves.
Yeah, and we've also been lucky with I think being so transparent from the start. It's also, we've had like very easygoing customers too, generally like almost all of them, and they've kind of, even when we've had issues and stuff, if we solve them quickly and kind of just also sort of acknowledge that it's maybe bad quality or something, then it's been all been fine, and then just kind of been working those kinks out, I guess, But yeah, that was basically quite a long story from start to when it actually started. But then, yeah.
Can I say something about that too? I just wanted to say, like, it's interesting because we always thought international. That's how we're going to keep this factory on its feet. But in the long run, it's the South African customers and that loyalty to local. Like, obviously we still want to expand our reach, but it has always been, the support has always been here, and we have to be super grateful for that. And we also have to, it was a big learning curve too, to not just overlook what's already working. We're grasping at the bit to get overseas, which is a very, also in the beginning, you need the time to learn what that means, because we're only at that level now. And in the beginning we were quite, courageous, and then we got knocked on our ass, and then you get courageous again. But to think that we were ready for international delivery, and we weren't. So it's actually just a good reminder to sell where you're at and test your market locally and go through those phases here, because you're going to have blunders and mess ups, and to not overlook what's working and to make sure this market receives it first before you ever try to just go overseas.
The main thing is really, there's a lot of massive corporations that I think, like, I don't know, I think we've never started it with the means to kind of, obviously to grow, but never to kind of this like mass scale, and the only way I see that happening and sort of really enjoying it, I think at least from my side, is with a team that feels like a family, and I think that could also, obviously that can exist at a corporate or a massive level, but I just think that at least for us and at least sort of the medium term vision, I've always seen it as a close-knit thing, and focusing on quality and ultimately getting our prices up, and that means that we can pay better than normal, and we're not chasing sort of just mass volume and mass consumption really. We're really small actually, if I look at, we drop in the bucket when it comes to actual footwear production, but doing the sums, and if you hit a certain capacity out of just our factory, it's totally fine. It could be at a very comfortable space with very happy staff, very well-paid staff too. And then you can probably decide from there what you really want to do. But I do think that it's quite hard to scale very quickly and very sustainably. I don't know. Maybe that is possible if that's always your plan from the start. But I think if you're really being conscious of it, it's a little harder, because you've got to really source your whole value chain. You've got to source sustainably, and that is tricky. And I think that's very hard on a large scale to kind of go, and if you kind of hold yourself to everything, or every value chain trying to source really sustainably, So, yeah, that's from my side.
No, to also kind of leverage on your points too, I think, coming from the States where things are definitely not perfect, but also being here and just blatantly seeing the struggle and knowing where our stock come from, that they, I think it's a huge oversight sometimes for other companies to not realize that the person who's working at your factory sometimes has to get on a train at, say, 5 a.m. They have to drop their kid off to school. They have to worry about their child and their safety, and they don't necessarily have this buffer for a nanny. A lot of times the communities take care of each other, but still there's always that risk and that fear. And for me, that breaks my heart, like, to know that the women in this factory worry about potentially abuse, or you never know, like, what's going on at home. And it would be a real, it's the human side. It's a harder thing to have a social impact, but it's the human side of acknowledging they're a sister, a mother, a daughter, like they're one of me, they're just the same. So, like, who am I to say you're only worth this amount of money? And also, footwear is such a art, actually, and it's so many levels of skill, and they have the skill set that very few people in the world actually have, that is going to disappear if we don't preserve it. So for me, it's just like this art form, and it's beautiful on all fronts, and like, why not make sure that they're taken care of in the process? South Africa has almost 35% unemployment and going up. That's a very scary stat, and I know the impact just from COVID and lockdown and us being on short time through this time. It's very unnerving and imbalanced period, and if you can imagine somebody being at home, in the long term, the communities are impacted because there's more violence, there's boredom at home. It turns into something that could be quite negative within families. There's no purpose in a person if they feel, I've been jobless in the States for, a few months, and you feel purposeless, you feel frustrated. So, like, it is not up to, but I believe small businesses are the way forward, because they can also navigate COVID and lockdown, this weird pandemic that we're in. We've been able to navigate that and be flexible, whereas a lot of people can't because they're too big to be flexible. We don't have to take weeks to make an internal decision. We have a one-step process of, do we want to do this today, yes or no, which is super nice and actually has proven to be very helpful in these times. So we can still secure jobs, we can still navigate this system together. So long-term goal, and I think, Christian's absolutely on board with this too and knows this, but we've looked at apple leather, Pinatex, we've looked at cork, which is available in South Africa. We've looked at, what else, like hemp and locally hand-printed fabrics. Like, for me, it would be number one to actually start working, when we can get the capacity up here, to work with like weavers in like Burkina Faso, or somewhere where we can make beautiful artisanal pieces from all over Africa and bring those in-house and use them as uppers on the shoes. So, beadwork, we've actually been looking at the park next to us. We have a bunch of beaders right across from us. Like, how can they bead on leather? How can we bring them into the story? Because they're consistent, they're out there every day, like rain or shine, they're there. And it would be so brilliant to like bring a piece of them into the shoemaking process, because that is very local. That's right next to us down the road. So I think long term, it's more, how do we work with more artisans? How do we work with better material? Well, not better, but materials that are not controversial, such as leather. Leather will always be a part of us, because I personally believe in how we source. For example, our springbok leathers or ostrich feather bags, those are all vet certified. They come from farms that are specific in the Karoo. It's the same guy who sends to Moulin Rouge, actually, for their feathers. They're like these beautiful plush pieces, and the animals are treated like well, and it's all quite like maintained, and there's an ecosystem to it. They can't overproduce, they can't obviously kill. And then the springbok come from culling a lot of the times, depending. So it's either farm or it's culling that happens in the northwest or certain areas. So the way that we source, I believe, is the right way as far as we're using leather, but I do believe there is a need for a vegan shoe that is not, that isn't blasé either, isn't plastic, because I think most people understand plastic isn't a good alternative either. But how do we get those materials here, or what, like I've even tried to look at a way where we can make mango leather from the South African farms, but obviously this is a project that's far bigger than I am, but I think somebody out there, $1 million idea, please go do it. Go make our local produce into leather. If we can turn apple into leather, why can't we make mango or something that we harvest locally, corn, stalk, whatever it is, into something we can turn into a material that we can use for lasting. So if somebody can do that, that will be fantastic. We'll work with you first, call us. But that's kind of the direction we see it. So working with more artisans, saying small batch, individual, expanding out the range to more of the African continent and more artisans in the African continent.
I'll just add that I think, you know, in terms of leather, it's got a lot to do with how is it dyed and stuff like that. So, you know, like veg tan, yeah, the water. Well, so like the tannery we source from, they recycle a lot of water. Like they, you know, it's like a closed system. You know, maybe not totally closed, I'm not sure, but you know, often if you're dyeing it in the sort of non-natural ways, a lot of the times it's an open system. They use a ton of water, and also those chemicals go back into the environment and all that. So it's basically got to do with how much it goes into dyeing that hide. You know, the more it's kind of colored and treated and stuff, obviously the worse really. So the more natural it is, the better. So if you look at like our soles are bend soles, you know, 3.5 mil thick bend soles, and
vegetable tanned.
Yeah, but if they get dyed even more, it's usually like a tree bark dye or something like. It's a very natural dye, you know, so it's not bad for the environment. But on our upper side, you know, for sure some of the, well, they've been treated by not as natural, you know, methods, you know. But I think that also working with tanneries they're also conscious of this, because they've got certain standards they can meet, and if they want to, you know, there's lots of standards they can, and sort of organizations they can belong to that will say that they meet these standards, you know, and by kind of sourcing from them, you are, you know, automatically also, you know, being more sustainable, you know. So just kind of being conscious of that, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of components that goes into shoes. You know, we were talking about it on the phone actually with, it's quite hard, I think, to replace it all, but maybe at least starting to move where if something new is available and you can incorporate it, then do that, you know. I mean, even like our shoelaces, they are not, I don't think they're not biodegradable or anything, and that's something that, you know, I was reading a magazine. There's a guy that does a whole like ebook range on and actually I can't remember the name now. I was going to send it to you actually, but the whole thing there is that he's saying because of all the components, and you know, once you throw a shoe in a landfill, it's very hard for that thing to decompose and stuff because there's so many synthetic things going into it, like even the thread and stuff, you know. So I think that there'll always be that part of it where it won't be completely, I won't say always, but until it's like really sort of more available, and that the suppliers are also making a better effort to kind of meet more sustainable standards, you know, and makes it easier for us that are sourcing it, you know.
I wanted to say on that note too, it's like interesting, even when we were looking into Pinatex and apple leathers, that the process in and of itself super sustainable, and like 100%, like, you know, it's like the villages recycling the stalks of the pineapples and then turning it and weaving it into this beautiful fiber. Incredible and super sustainable. But then it gets to the dyeing the top, and there's a lot of plastic and chemicals used to treat the top of that. So I think with anything, you're never going to be perfect, but we should definitely strive to work towards that more perfect, you know, future and how we're using materials. But it's just important to know that, like, you got to choose a process and do it the best way you can. But, you know, I really beat myself up about, it was very hard for me in the beginning to talk about sustainability because there's such a divide between leather and vegan and leather and vegan. It took me a while to like really study and research and make sure, like we're saying, we had that relationship with our suppliers. So I felt confident that I'm not doing the wrong thing and I'm not saying the wrong thing. So I think, the big lesson though is just to know that like no process is yet 100% perfect, but there are definitely more perfect ways of, creating a product. There are more sustainable ways, and to look how. I personally believe that leather is an incredible material. We don't have many alternative options that are fairly priced in South Africa. So if we're going to use leather, we must use all of it. We know in the world that leather is not good for the planet, but I genuinely believe like it's how you use leather, right? And that you're using every aspect of it, that it's locally sourced, that it's a byproduct of the meat industry, that it's not just, so it's important to have those relationships with your supplier and to do it the best way you can. Because like we've looked at Pinatex, we've looked at apple leather, but we'd need to charge $4,000 a shoe, which most people just can't afford. And it's, like I believe that leather has longevity. So our long-term goal is to bring shoes back, repair them in-house, so that people can have their shoes ongoing and they're not just buying and buying and buying more leather products, kind of a thing.
Maybe the one thing that we've probably had the most arguments about was just kind of keeping it simple in the beginning, right? Because it's like, it's kind of weird. I don't know. Like sometimes I do contradict myself. Like we're going, people do want options and variation, and that's great. And like I think you must work towards that. But it's quite hard because you coil a lot of these things in the pot, and then it's like, and then before you know it, it's like quite hard to kind of really
go backwards.
Yeah, to go backwards because you've already kind of given this offering and stuff. And I think also it's just way quicker to kind of go, if you're developing kind of really sort of simply in the beginning, it's easier to get that product to its best quality the quickest. If you do want to change stuff out, it's easy. You don't have to roll it out with everything. Because like even things as simple as our lining. If we start using thicker lining or thinner lining, it changes the development because now the sock is thicker. And now maybe it fits a little tighter. And so you really. But this is all stuff we've learned the hard way, I guess. And you kind of pay for it, but there's no real other way, I guess, unless maybe you do listen to other people that have gone through the same thing, But I would say that less is more concept for sure. Also, limiting people's options is actually fine, because it's like the ice cream shop sort of concept. Give them 36 flavors, that's great, but there's probably only 3 selling, And then I think it's tough because I think the other stuff does draw you in, and that's cool because that sort of differentiates you. But I think keeping it simple in the beginning is for sure one of the main things. You also can be very conscious of how you're sourcing all the stuff because we use so many materials, and I can honestly say that not all of it is coming from the same place, obviously. So it's if you're really going into it and studying where all the stuff is coming from, it might not even fit your your ethos, and that's quite hard if you expand quickly to kind of go, but is it really aligning, And I think it's much easier if it's simpler. But yeah, Janae sits on the other spectrum, I think, we've got to find we found a good balance, I think, where we're going, okay, cool, we can do crazy and wonderful and weird things, which is always going to be part of the brand, probably going to get crazy even eventually, but then also doing the core stuff like really well, and then that kind of can bleed into the
so Christian's spot on. I think you're really right with your, with starting things simply. I think we struggled a lot because it wasn't simple, but it was fun. I had a lot of fun. But like I said, I was explaining to you earlier that in our first year, we grew really quickly for us, for what we were, we put out a big range and we grew quickly. And then our team wasn't used to this process like we are now. Like we're pretty comfortable with our day-to-day chaos and can plan, but because of that we had a lot of souls that were coming loose. There wasn't there wasn't like the production process itself wasn't timed. We didn't have the time to like learn the new skill sets to make this shoe and that shoe and that shoe, and they're all running on the line the whole time, and because of it we burned. So we had a lot of souls coming loose this 1 month where we had particularly high sales. And then we probably lost a lot of those customers, I'd imagine, because they're frustrated by the experience. Because not only do we have at that stage, we had a 15-day work lead time, which is a little bit more than now. And then they have these souls coming loose. And we were late with our orders because we weren't used to the variation. So that was a really tough learning curve, and that's probably because the creative side didn't understand the production side. And so that's the melding of the two are really important. And I don't think we're ever going to be a traditional facility in that we're not like an assembly line in mass production, but I still think it's important to know that you have to run some sort of volume through this facility still for it to be viable for our team and to make sure they have enough work. And that is a part of like how much design is available and how much time you're spending developing. So
in the beginning, it was a lot of like sort of conflict between, I'd say, the sales and the production side, because you're only as strong as, they're only as strong as each other, so if sales is pumping, then production must keep up, and if production has not got enough work, then sales must bring it, but what's kind of happening is we were quite late initially with some of our orders, and then it's very easy to point the fingers at production and go, guys, we're late, and you keep saying we need more sales, but you're still late. But what we've learned going forward is going, okay, well, is the process really as streamlined as it can be? Are we like, if we're given everybody the tools that they need for this specific style, and can they get it out in the time that we've costed it at? And now, before this one style maybe is done, you've already chucked in the next thing, and it's like quite a few spokes in the wheel, and so it's then it's like you kind of have to be lenient in that sense, and you can't say, guys, but you're not getting this done, and kind of point the fingers because you haven't made it as easy as possible. If you've made it as easy as possible, then, and it's still not coming off, then you've got a different problem to solve, but I think that was in the beginning.
Process driven, like we always talk about processes, every business needs, it's 4 pillars before you can build on it. And we kind of did it the other way where we built a ton and made us look really big, which worked for sales because it looked like we were a big company. In the background we were these
The catalog was beautiful, but it was quite difficult to deliver it,
And so we did it the other, And also neither of us have had a traditional background in footwear, and a lot of the factories in South Africa are family run and family based, and there's a bit of history or content behind it. But his mom, she's incredibly technical and creative, almost extremely creative. And I think she and I would agree like on the many styles. She'd just say, no, of course we can do this. Yes, say yes. Meanwhile, Christian wants to kill both of us. He's like, are you serious? We cannot do another style. And she's like, go for it. And, it's taken many years to understand that and for me to respect that and to appreciate, no, it's not necessarily true that I can just go and develop. Now we have an in-house
pattern maker,
and he's making sure that our next styles that come out, we'll come out with 4 new ones, not 20 for the next season, which is a fast fashion mentality actually, is to think you can do 20 styles a season because you want to. So honing in on our identity, that's been very important, like on our audience and what they are buying, which isn't always what I want to be making. In fact, because toffee always sells, and I'm always like for the zebra prints and cheetah prints and wild stuff. So you have to listen to all of that, even if it's against your what you want to be doing. You really need to hone in on your audience and know who you're serving, or you're a bit lost.
I think you got to decide what are you trying to become good at say this facility or this factory, right? And then, large brands, they probably don't have one factory. They might have factories all over the world, but they all align with what they're trying to produce and their ethos and their sustainability sort of, they align with that, and so then you can kind of go, okay, well, this factory can do these styles really well. Potentially, let's see if we can develop this new style in here. If it doesn't really make sense, maybe you fill up, hopefully, your capacity with that, and then you go to the next place and start developing that with them, But that was quite tricky in the beginning because I think you're always trying to obviously get the capacity full, But at the same time, like, it's got to make sense. You've got to be geared for it, Otherwise, it just gets really hard really quickly, and then it's the joy becomes stress, and then. And then you sort of start losing track of your, I wouldn't say your identity in that sense, but then, because then I'm kind of going, but let's just keep doing the everyday faster moving things, and then sort of gradually do the other stuff, But you've got to find a balance of it, I think,
And that was a big decision too, is actually going back to the drawing board in the midst of a lot of stress at one stage and saying, if we're unhappy, why are we doing this? Like, where is our why? What's the reason why we did this? And ultimately, am I too egocentric to give up more styles for more stress? Or am I willing to say, no, I need to admit, like, this isn't working for us, and we need to resolve this so that everybody on the team is happy, because my temporary joy of creating is causing long-term strain on everybody. And that's a difficult one, but at the end of the day, we decided we want to be happy. What's the ultimate goal in life? It's to be happy. So if we're going to be doing this and we're going to be in a job, we don't want to be in a job. We want to be in a business we love. So, and it did feel like a job for a while. It did feel straining and frustrating and really gutting at some stages. But I think every business goes through that, you know. But now we really are like in a flow, and I feel like there's a good balance of an understanding between getting quantity out and starting with unique, you know, having unique pairs in between. And finally feels like it's at a pace where it's like breathable and comfortable. But yeah, it wasn't always that way.
I think it's just probably, you find a lot of the shortfall. You got to stick to the long-term vision, and it's risky, you know, like any business, I think would be, you know, you don't really know. I mean, we've actually done considerably well, or considering the last few months with COVID, we've been very fortunate and grateful. So, but, you know, if the sales aren't there, you know, then you've got to make a plan, and you've got to decide, like, how much are you willing to personally invest, and at what stage do you think it might turn or not. So that's kind of a thing where I think it also comes down to each individual sort of like, what's the word, propensity, or for risk, you know, how much you can actually handle. But it's also quite interesting because, you know, especially when in the beginning, I mean, like, you do invest a lot of your own money and time, and still do, you know. But I think you go and read up about other businesses, and there's guys that have been in way worse sort of debt situations where they've pumped so much money in, and then they come out of it. You know, you don't probably hear all the stories where it doesn't, but it's just also, it gives you new perspective. You know, for some people it would be a ton of money, and the next guy maybe not so much, you know. And so I think that the way I see it is to try and keep perspective of that, and try and go and say, okay, well, nobody said it was going to be easy from the start, you know, and I think that shouldn't put you off from starting your own thing, but you've got to be aware that that's a reality. It could happen, you know. Us being in the business together, that's also been very tricky because you're in the same boat, you know, the whole time. So
it can be good or bad. It can be better or worse depending on, I mean, sounds like a very simple way to say it, but it's true, because like this machine here in between your skull is the most powerful thing for anything in life. But I would say, like, for me personally, I think, okay, first of all, I am no saint. I've quit our business many times. Let me just tell you, because it's okay if you just remember this. If you go start a business and you're like, I've had enough, or you break down in tears, like, it's normal, and it's okay, because that's what business does to you. It stretches you, but you just have to keep working on this and your mindset, and the power of this, you know, is infinite. And mindset and just working on yourself personally, because like a marriage or anything, you go into it and you're not totally sound or stable in your thoughts, you're going to bring that into whatever situation you're in. So don't think any different. But the good news is that business, if you stick it out, you're forced to grow. And what scared us before isn't so scary anymore. You know, we're going to have more pitfalls. The business cycle is kind of like up, and then you hit down, and up, and then, oh, it's a little bit of a dip, and then it's way down again, and then, you know. So you're going to have these moments that are always going to come at you, and some are scarier than others, and some are new. And
some of the problems repeat, but they initially were just big problems. Now they're just smaller problems, right? And so,
because we know how to handle it. It's not unknown anymore. It's like, okay, we've been through that. We can get through that. But a new problem or solution we don't know, it's just something that's new, and so we feel scared by it, is potentially like this international order, but it's at stakes where, like, is it too big for us? Is it something we can handle or not handle? And Christian and I now need to talk through that and decide, you know, what is our strategy for this? Do we outsource some of it? Do we keep it in-house?
You want to be consistent and,
like it feels like the weight of the world is on our shoulders because this is an opportunity during a very harsh time to create work full time for our team right now. And it could be great, but if we don't deliver, it could be really bad because it's for an international corporate kind of company who's looking towards ethical brands to improve its face, like I was saying. And
you only have that one sort of chance to really make that impression,
and you look at the money and you think, okay, well, this can be a game changer for us, amazing. But you can't. We've luckily been through enough pitfalls to understand you cannot look at the money. That's not the thing that is the most important. What is important is that we can keep going, and is that the best decision for us right now. So there's an example of kind of like a personal challenge currently, and a new frame of reference. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to create a strategy to the best of our ability and go for it, So yeah, you're confronted all the time with those decisions, big or small.
I just want to add, I think that also, because it's very family involved business, and so I think family business can be really great and also really terrible because you need the support. You actually are the support of each other, But I think what's been interesting just to quickly say is luckily Janae and I have often been on different spectrums, so we sort of like there. We're not always going through the same motion, and I think that helps because you do need you need to pick each other. If you're in that space, and it's bad when you're both feeling really down or whatever, and it's great when you're both feeling amazing, but often it's there, and that's actually also a really great thing actually, because you can be really supportive, but it's really kind of just sometimes changing perspective and going, maybe not like being okay with that necessarily, like you want to change your situation, of course, that you've got to realize, but also going, maybe this isn't so bad. This is just another challenge that we've got to get through,
And please have a mixtape of amazing podcasts on hand when you hit rock bottom. Honestly, it pulled me out every time. Like people who talk about changing your mindset and overcoming obstacles. I mean, there's people who have, just incredible achievers in the world with this insane resilience towards, any sort of risk or grief, and they just pick themselves back up. Some don't, but they overcome it. And just listening to people go through those sorts of situations really helps you pull yourself out when you're feeling rock bottom. So just have a great podcast list and like speakers and people you respect, because it helps a lot.
If I can add to that, I think it's also, if you're doing things you enjoy, let's say things aren't stressful, and you do things that you enjoy, like maybe you love running or exercising or cycling or whatever it is that's all exercise, but the stuff that you genuinely enjoy, you must keep doing. And then if you do hit a sort of dark time with your business, you just keep doing that stuff at least, even though you don't feel like it. It's the one thing that gets you, back into a better space, especially exercise, I would say, and like Janae said with the podcast, because like you have these kind of few things that work for you, like simple things like drinking enough water or whatever it is, and then you suddenly just you don't take care of yourself, and then so if you're feeling down and you still at least continue doing that stuff, at least just you staying in control of the stuff that that you can easily control. It's not going to necessarily change it overnight, but at least it's not making it worse. So you suddenly you're still going for that run, even though you really don't feel like going for it. You almost always feel better. Like I've never felt worse afterwards. And I think kind of maybe even having a list of stuff that you can just fall back on and go, okay, I'm still going to do this, even though it's maybe not as fun as it usually feels, but it will pull me out of this space, So at least that's what's worked for us. And I think
a reminder too, because everything feels huge when you're in a depressed or frustrated state. Like your business is your world, and you just have to remember you're a blip on the map. And sometimes it's a good, important thing to remind yourself, because what you're going through feels huge, but it's really not that big of a deal. And even if you were to fail, it's not that big of a deal, because I personally, obviously, I don't want us to fail. You're always going forward, but I've always said I'm not super afraid of failure, because I understand fundamentally that we are creative people. We could get back on the horse and we could do something else, and we can keep going. And sometimes you just have to, this is like the love of your life, especially when it's a labor of love, you put everything into it, but you have to realize it is a business and there are emotions attached to it. I think there should be, as much as people say, separate them. I don't really believe that you always can, but I do think that you just have to keep perspective of who you are and that what you're going through isn't the end of the world. And when it feels like it's the end of the world, like there's a lot of people who have failed before us, and there's a lot of people who have done way better that are unicorn companies. So like you just have to put things into perspective and realize you're doing the best you can, and you just keep going in the best way you can. And if it's going to cost you your health or your happiness, then stop.
Acting from a place of feeling more in control also, which is what we probably at more now than ever before, you know. Well, yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of external factors like this COVID, and you know, we're not running at any full kind of capacity, but I do feel like we are able to kind of make decisions. You know, we're more sort of educated about our decisions and stuff, and saying like, is this going to be good? Is this going to be a kind of a quick short-term fix, or is it going to be a longer sustaining kind of thing? You know, so because for us, like because we're quite small scale still, you know, suddenly getting a big opportunity, like you know, the best thing is to adapt as quickly as possible and do it, but also going suddenly to increase an insane amount, it's also scary. You got to be like ready for it, and you can also sort of compromise your quality and stuff if you don't have all those processes in place, and you're not completely confident in saying maybe hitting those kind of targets, you know. But yeah, I think that's what makes it exciting and fun, you know, and kind of going, okay, this is another challenge, and let's just do whatever we can to solve it, you know. But yeah, we often like kind of each other's voice of reason too, you know. And I think that's also...
He's more my voice of reason than I am. I'm more emotional. I'm like, all the time.
Well, we need both, I guess.
No. The other thing I was going to say is just like money mindset too. You know, like I think initially pricing is very scary, and just to not like shortchange yourself. I think we learned in the beginning too. I mean, obviously we were new and we didn't have the confidence to back our product, and I think that's a big aspect to it. We didn't charge enough so that our margins were good enough so we could pay well enough so that we had money at the end of the month. So just consider, like, just because you are smaller, you start at the beginning, doesn't mean you shouldn't be charging your value or your worth. And yeah, just to take things slowly and in stride, because there's no such thing as I mean, there are unicorn companies, but they're probably backed by somebody out there. So you just have to remember, go slow and do not benchmark yourself against, I mean, look at the industry that you're around and like know what's going on there, but like don't follow them, you know, do your own thing, and realize that business is a slow process. For us, 3 years feels like a long time, but actually it's a very short time in business. And you know, and my expectation was that we go like 0 to 100 in the beginning, and that would have killed us actually. So you have to just go slow, take things day by day, and just have your goals and vision in place, know where you're going so that you don't lose sight of that, but also just don't expect to be a millionaire like tomorrow, because it's probably not going to happen. I hate to tell you that, but like that's why you have to enjoy the journey, because there's no point in doing business just for money. You have to have a reason for why you're doing something. You're going to get very burnt out very quickly if it's just for money. We all know that doesn't really fulfill you at the end of the day. That's not the only, it's great. It gives us freedom and time and to do the things we love, but it's not the objective of our life. So just keep that in mind when you're starting something.